The bottom line is this. I'm the guy that says yay or nay because I'm the guy that's responsible for this bike when it goes to the customer. You wanted to change the exhaust, not me. You went ahead and you done that.
A recently uncovered fraud lawsuit against Orange County Choppers has exposed a version of the company that American Chopper viewers never saw.
Just for the record, Orange County Choppers is not going out of business. We've been here for a long time and we expect to stay here for a long time.
At its peak, the show drew 3.4 million weekly viewers, while the business behind it generated around $40 million a year. But behind the success, the empire began to unravel as the building was handed back to the bank. Bankruptcy filings emerged, and financial records told a very different story. So what really happened when the cameras stopped? And how did it all fall apart? Join us as we uncover how American Chopper was shut down after a shocking discovery. The show that took over cable television. When American Chopper first appeared on Discovery Channel on September 29, 2002, nobody in the building expected what was about to happen. The premise was so simple, it almost sounded boring. A family builds custom motorcycles in upstate New York, with the father running the shop, and the son does the designs, while a camera follows them around. That is it. That was the whole idea. What nobody predicted was that those two men, the father and the son, would turn out to be two of the most entertaining and most infuriating people ever put on television at the same time. Paul Tutul Sr., who ran the shop, was big, loud, tattooed, permanently intense, and absolutely certain that his way was the only way worth doing anything. Paul Tutul Jr. was the creative genius behind every motorcycle they built. He was talented, stubborn, and completely unwilling to be pushed around, including by his own father. The moment those two personalities shared a camera, something happened that television executives spend their entire careers trying to manufacture and almost never actually find. The tension, arguments, and the love underneath the arguments was real. And millions of people watched every week because they recognized exactly what they were seeing. A family that could not figure out how to exist in the same room without fighting, and could not figure out how to exist in separate rooms either. By 2004, the show was averaging 3.4 million viewers per episode and had become the Discovery Channel's highest-rated original program in the male 18 to 49 demographic, excluding sports. That is not just good numbers. That is numbers that make network executives sleep well and wake up happy. And the motorcycles themselves were extraordinary. They were not bikes people rode to work or took on weekend trips through the countryside. They were themed machines that existed somewhere between sculpture and engineering, built for clients who wanted a statement rather than transportation. The client list during the show's peak years reads like a who's who of American popular culture. A Spider-Man bike, a firefighter memorial bike, a September 11th tribute bike, a Black Widow bike, a Yankees bike commissioned directly by catcher Jorge Posada for his charitable foundation, a bike built for the premiere of Will Smith's film I, Robot, with Smith personally involved in the design.
And trust the genius of their work to give me something hot.
It'll be fun to do something real modern, spacey looking, futuristic, you know?
A B-2 stealth bomber bike commissioned by Northrop Grumman and the United States Air Force to mark the aircraft's 20th anniversary. Corporate clients were paying between $50,000 and $150,000 per bike. The phone was ringing constantly. The money was extraordinary. But underneath all the success, something was building between Paul Sr. and Paul Jr. that no amount of television ratings or corporate commissions could hold in place forever. So what finally broke? And when did it break? The father, the son, and the fight nobody could stop. To understand why American Chopper eventually collapsed, You have to understand the specific nature of what was wrong between Paul Tootle Sr. and Paul Tootle Jr., because it was not a simple disagreement about business. It was something that had been building for decades before any camera ever pointed at either of them. Paul Sr. was a self-made man who had pulled himself up through hard physical work, built a steel fabrication business from nothing, and then turned a basement hobby into a globally recognized motorcycle brand. He had an enormous amount of pride in what he had created, a genuine belief that the discipline and work ethic he demanded were the reason anything good had ever come from Orange County choppers, and a management style that most people working for him would have described as relentless at its best and terrifying at its worst. Paul Jr. was his son in both the best and worst ways that phrase can mean. He had inherited his father's talent, his father's stubbornness, and his father's absolute certainty that his own instincts were correct. He was also genuinely gifted in ways that his father was not, specifically in the area of creative design. Every themed motorcycle that made OCC famous started as a drawing that came out of Junior's imagination. The business that Senior had built became famous because of what Junior made inside it. The arguments that played out on American Chopper were not staged and were not exaggerated for the camera. They were genuine disagreements between two genuine people who had complicated history that predated the television show by many years. Viewers who had grown up in families where love and conflict lived in the same space recognized what they were watching immediately. The show was not about motorcycles. It was about a father and a son. The motorcycles were just the reason they were in the same room. Mikey Tootle, the younger brother who appeared regularly on the show, was the person who tried to exist in the space between them. He was funnier and looser than either of them, and he provided the kind of comic relief that let audiences breathe between the fights. He eventually told producers that the family conflict was taking a toll that was heavier than what the cameras were capturing. He was right. The show at its best was completely honest about what it was documenting. A family under enormous pressure, building extraordinary things in a way that was slowly damaging the people doing the building. That honesty was what made it compelling. And that honesty was about to produce the moment that broke everything open. In 2008, with the show at a high point and the business generating more money than anyone from the Ironworks days could have imagined, Paul Sr. fired his son. What followed was beyond explosive. The lawsuit and the day the show died. The firing of Paul Jr. from Orange County Choppers was not a television moment. It was a real termination of employment, with real legal consequences between two people who had real history together and who both hired real lawyers the moment it happened. Junior believed he was owed equity in the business he had helped build into a $40 million operation. Senior believed the business was his to run as he saw fit, and that Junior had not held up his end of what was required. Both men brought attorneys. The dispute went to mediation, and then to a settlement whose terms were kept out of public view. The legal process was not fast, and while it was running, the television show had no obvious way forward. Discovery Channel paused production while the situation between its two main subjects was legally unresolved. When enough time had passed, the network came back with a restructured format. Rather than pretend the rupture had not happened, they built the new show around it. In 2010, American Chopper returned as American Chopper, Senior versus Junior, following both men and their separate operations simultaneously, with OCC on one side and Paul Jr. Designs on the other hand. The relaunch generated initial viewer interest, but not sustained viewership. And the reason it did not work says everything about why the original had. The original show was compelling because two people who loved each other were fighting inside a shared project. The arguments meant something because both people had something to lose from them. When the family was formally divided and the shared project no longer existed, the fights became colder. Formal competition is less interesting to watch than the specific kind of conflict between people who are hurting each other and cannot stop. The audience could feel the difference, and the ratings reflected it. By 2012, Discovery canceled the franchise entirely. What most viewers did not know when that announcement came was that the television problems were the small part of a much larger financial disaster that had been quietly developing for years. So what had been happening to the actual money during all of this? The $12 million building that became a disaster. In 2007, at the absolute peak of what OCC and American Chopper had built together, Paul Sr. commissioned a new headquarters. It was a brand new building from the ground up, designed to announce to the world that Orange County Choppers was not a television show. It was an institution. The building opened on Route 17K in Newburgh, New York in April 2008. It cost $12 million. It covered 61,000 square feet. It had a custom motorcycle workshop, a retail store, a museum showing off OCC's most famous completed bikes, a visitor center, a movie theater. Paul Sr. had not built a workshop. He had built a destination, a physical monument to the brand at the exact moment the brand was at its most visible. In 2007, the logic behind this decision was not unreasonable. The corporate commissions were coming in steadily. The show was watched by millions every week. The merchandise was selling. Every signal said the OCC brand had the kind of sustained commercial strength that could support a permanent physical institution. Then 2008 happened. The Great Recession hit the American economy like a wall, and the market for $50,000 to $150,000 custom art piece motorcycles did not slow down gently. It essentially ceased to exist. The corporations that had been spending huge money on themed bikes for promotional purposes stopped spending money on anything that was not absolutely essential to keeping their businesses alive. They were not buying custom motorcycles. They were trying to survive. Between 2006 and 2010, total American motorcycle sales fell by 41%. The fan tourism that was supposed to fill the 61,000 square foot building was driven by the show's visibility, and the show had just been canceled. The retail operation needed customers. The museum needed visitors. The visitor center needed people to visit. None of those things were coming through the door in the numbers the overhead demanded. And on top of all of this, the television show that had been the engine behind everything was gone. In 2011, unable to keep servicing the debt on the building, the Tutuls surrendered the headquarters to its lender, GE Commercial Finance, and negotiated a lease to keep operating inside part of it. In March 2016, GE Commercial Finance sold the property at auction. The hammer came down at $2.3 million. $2.3 million for a building that had cost $12 million to construct 8 years earlier. An 82% loss. Not because the building had fallen apart, because the brand that had given it value was no longer generating the audience that made the value real. And the financial damage was still not finished. Because what the bankruptcy filing eventually revealed about Paul Sr.'s personal finances was something that nobody who had watched him oversee a $40 million business was prepared to read. The bankruptcy numbers that left everyone speechless. In 2017, a business partner named Thomas Derbyshire filed a lawsuit against Paul Sr. The suit alleged that money Thomas Derbyshire had invested in the operation had been used for personal purposes rather than the business purposes it had been provided for. Paul Sr. denied the allegations, but the lawsuit added legal pressure at a moment when the financial picture was already very difficult. In February 2018, Paul Tutul Sr. filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy. The court documents he was required to submit contained specific numbers that were genuinely hard to believe, given where the business had been at its peak. His monthly income from Orange County choppers, approximately $16,500. His monthly expenses, over $20,000. Every single month, he was spending around $3,500 more than he was bringing in. The man who had overseen $40 million in annual revenue was now, personally, running a negative monthly budget. His home in Montgomery, New York was in foreclosure. His total debts exceeded $1 million. The gap between the image of American Chopper at its height and the reality of these court documents is one of the most striking financial falls in the entire history of reality television. The bankruptcy trustee eventually moved to have the case dismissed, citing Paul Sr.'s failure to provide required federal tax documentation for 2017 and 2018, and noting that his disclosed budget showed he would not be able to make the Chapter 13 plan payments the bankruptcy arrangement required. The man who had once been television's most famous motorcycle builder was now being told by a court that his budget did not cover the minimum payments on his own bankruptcy plan. The bankruptcy proceedings also generated a separate courtroom moment that felt remarkably familiar to anyone who had watched the original show. During a mediation session connected to a dispute with a company called JTM Motorsports, which claimed Paul Sr. had promised promotional appearances in exchange for work on his Corvette and had not delivered those appearances, sources present described him standing up, directing explicit language at the opposing party, and leaning across the table in a way that caused the opposing attorney to request security be called. 3 court officers responded. Paul Sr.'s representatives disputed the account. It was, in a darkly ironic way, the most on-brand moment of the entire post-show era. The man who had built a television career on losing his temper in a motorcycle workshop was now losing his temper in a bankruptcy mediation room. The cameras were gone. The behavior was the same. Discovery Channel tried one final time. In 2018, they launched a reboot, catching up with both Tutul's and their separate businesses. The reboot ran briefly. It was canceled again. The audience that had loved the original show was not coming back in the numbers needed to justify continuing. But the failure of the reboot didn't just end another attempt at revival. It confirmed something bigger about where the show and the world around it had already moved. What was left and why it matters. The distance between Orange County choppers at its peak and where things stand today is one of the most dramatic measurements in the history of television-adjacent businesses. Orange County choppers relocated to Florida. Paul Sr. eventually established an operation in Pinellas Park called the OCC Roadhouse and Museum, running out of an 11,000-square-foot facility that combines a workshop, a restaurant, a concert venue, and a museum. 11,000 square feet versus 61,000 square feet. A roadhouse restaurant versus a $12 million destination complex. The contrast tells the whole story without requiring any additional explanation. Paul Jr. still operates Paul Jr. Designs in New York and continues building motorcycles. He has spoken about the years it took to repair the relationship with his father and about how the cameras made everything that was already difficult between them harder and more public than it needed to be. He has built furniture. He has done licensing work. He has stayed in the world he knows. The father and the son have reconciled personally. Both have confirmed this publicly across multiple interviews across multiple years. They have also both confirmed, with equal clarity, that they will not work together professionally again. The relationship that drove one of the most watched shows on American cable television left enough real damage that the people inside it are willing to have each other back in their lives while being absolutely certain they will never again share a business. What the American Chopper story ultimately teaches is not complicated. A business built on a specific cultural moment, a specific economic climate, and a specific family dynamic will not survive when all three of those things change at the same time. The show worked because of something real. The business grew because of something real. The building was built because everything felt permanent. And then the economy crashed, the show's format broke, the corporate clients stopped calling, and the building that was supposed to declare permanence was sold at an 82% loss. The most expensive motorcycle Paul Sr. ever built cost the corporate client $150,000. The most expensive mistake was the one built on the assumption that the moment would last forever. The cameras are gone, the empire is smaller, and the family that once defined American Chopper is no longer working together. Which leaves one final question. Did the show document a successful business that collapsed? Or a collapse that just happened to be filmed from the very beginning? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.